preliminary before the first classical international elite tournament will begin. This is basically the tiebreaker. Whoever wins the CHESS960 tournament will win the tournament in the case of a tie on points. The point system is quite complex here in Biel. 3 points for a classical win, 2 points for a rapid win, 1 point for a blitz win. But as was shown last year, the classical wins are gold. And of course, you can Biel has experimented with a number of scoring systems in the past. I remember back in 2012, they tried a 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw soccer scoring system. And the result was that Magnus Carlsen would have won the tournament under a normal scoring system, but because Wang Hao managed to lose more and win more, he actually edged out Carlsen for first place. It was quite an extraordinary start for that particular scoring system. So the third round games will be starting fairly soon. The first up will be Noel Studer against Radislav Wojtaszek, and Studer is constantly playing on the first board as the main local player. So we'll start with him first. And of course, he has no points at the moment. He is up against Radislav Wojtaszek, who is the tournament leader on 2 points. And the player who'll probably know most about the new position that we've got for round 3 is Mickey Adams, because he played a match against Peter Svidler, which included 4 games from this particular position. So he has considerable experience here. Now, of course, he let's see, will be up against who will he be up against? He will have the white pieces this time. I've lost his game, sorry. He's got black against Donchenko. Donchenko, the last minute substitute, who will have to go home after today because he's only been called up for the CHESS960 tournament. But Adams actually has a second black in a row. And I believe in all his games against Lecco, he had the white pieces. So that will be a little bit strange for him. This particular position is one where things can go wrong because there are 2 unprotected pawns at the start, h7 and no, there's only one actually, h7. e7's okay. So, and there's no bishops pointing at h7, so we could get off to a fairly normal start. The most common move in the position we've got is g3. We'll see if that transpires, but the players are currently having their 5 minutes to have a quick look, and then, and they've just started. So we'll start with Studer, and he started with f4, and only after d5 did he play g3. That means the bishop on h1 is doing well, the bishop on e1 not so well. And well, Black's queen is ready to come out, but it doesn't really have anywhere to go. The bishop on e8 is ready to come out. Again, it's hard to know exactly where it'll be useful, but the general principle that your knights usually know where to go quicker than your bishops do is probably a good principle for CHESS960. So knight f6 played by Hari Krishna, and he's sitting on a 1.5, just half a point behind Wojtaszek. So yeah, this is definitely a pretty weird position. Once again, we expect both kings to castle on the queen side. Black would have to move a lot of pieces before the king could go to any other side. And okay, so we'll just move on, from Hari Krishna's game, and we'll go to the Wojtaszek game just to see how the leader is going. with the black pieces against Michael Adams. So Adams played G3, standard move here, and instead, well, Wojciech may actually have seen Kaymer's game. It's hard to know for sure. Actually, it's very difficult for players to see other boards unless they get up and walk around, and that is not encouraged in the COVID world where the players are separated by a perspex screen. And the players are required to take all hand hygiene before the start of the game, their boards cleaned and so on. So we have another game with G6 and F5. This time it's black playing that way. And yeah, it's a question now whether Adams wishes to play bishop c3 and swap off some pieces. It is the bishop on e1 that could be the problem piece. So neutralizing that bishop on h8 could be good. Of course, black can play knight f6 and refuse to swap things off. But then, well, actually then the bishop on c3 is at least decently placed. Do not believe the clocks, by the way. So I'll just take you back to the Studer game because there's something rather weird going on. And remember, they cannot see each other's games. But here, Studer has gone for the bishop c3 plan against Hare Krishna. So he does want to swap off that that bishop, and well, knight f6 has been played, so it won't be swapped off immediately. But white can go knight f3 and knight e5, and that's a very healthy square, that e5 square. So I can more understand why black would leave a pawn on d6 rather than d5. There are ideas of attacking weak squares like knight g4, but it's only the h3 square that's really a problem. So black may be looking to play c5. No, c5 bishop e5 check would be rather unfortunate. It practically mate. So yeah, this is a little bit annoying for black. Of course, you can put your knight on c6, but after knight f3, I'm not really sure what black's next move will be. So it feels as if white's got whatever small advantage there will be. But it's still a long, long way to go before either side can castle. So this is going to be quite a messy game. I will, however, have a look at the Donchenko game next, because that one is also looking rather like all the others, which is pretty amazing. So Donchenko against Kaymer leading with 2 out of 2. And yeah, Kaymer has been a bit more cautious. Although he's played g6, he has played d6 and he hasn't gone with f5. So white will probably have a chance to build up a big pawn center. Whether you can do much with it is hard to say. And Donchenko's decided he's not terribly worried about his h1 bishop at the moment. He knows he can play g3 anytime. But he did play bishop d2 and bishop h6 to try to swap off a dark squared bishop. Well, actually, all he's doing is he was attacking a rook at the time because black hadn't played bishop g7. So it's very weird. But he has prevented castling on the king side, which is a good start. The rook has now moved. Weird, but although it's hard to remember in a CHESS960 game. And yeah, black is still a way away from castling king side. So that is certainly a normal. It's beginning to look a little bit like a Pietz, actually, except a Pietz where black's managed to run the king a long, long way away. So it's really no worry. So I guess we should now have a look at the one game that we haven't yet seen, and that is David Anton's game. And David Anton is up against Romain Edouard, who had a lucky win in the last round, but at least didn't have a lucky win in the first round the way we thought. And Edouard's found a different way to activate that bishop on e8 with f5 and no g6, but a very quick bishop h5, almost like a Dutch defense. He's also kept d6 in the position rather than d5, so that there's no e5 square for the white pieces to pivot on. So it feels as if black's come out of this fairly well. The question will be whether he can afford to play g6 or whether that will leave the bishop on h5 a bit stranded. I tend to think the bishop on h5 will be fairly safe even after g6, but black will be a little bit cautious. I would be guessing black's going to play queen d7 next and then castle queenside. And that castle queenside will drag the king back to c8 and the rook will jump over it. So in a way, you'd rather leave it on b8, but the only way you can activate your rook there will be a5, which is not crazy, but it's nothing special. So queen d2 played. You can see white's getting ready for some sort of castling, and black will probably do the same. Queen d2, queen d7 looks like it's going to be just a normal position, but one where both bishops on h1 and h8 are stupid, but both can come out relatively easily. There is a real question here, actually, whether bishop takes f3 could be played. You'd have to take with the rook, otherwise your bishop would never come out, and then maybe e5 with an idea of playing e4 rather quickly could be decent. The only problem is black is attacking without having a lot of pieces working. The bishop on h8 is not working yet. So there's a chance that the f5 pawn could become unstable, or the e5 pawn. So I'm not absolutely convinced by this. So yeah, we shall see. The most remarkable thing, he didn't take on, he played e5 straight away. Takes. Now you can't take on f3 because we take on f6. So he's going to take back. And why is he giving away the e5 pawn? It's because of a queen e6 move at the end, maybe trying to get the e2 pawn. It doesn't look very good at all. I do not understand what Edouard is on about. Sure, e2 is a little bit weak. You could swap and go knight g4, but the bishop can drop back without any problems at all. So that is a bizarre pawn sacrifice. And I would say, okay, so he's going to take, knight takes, bishop takes, queen e6. That at least means that if d4 is played, the c4 pawn might be weak. But after queen e6, we can think about playing queen f4, threatening the c7 pawn. And that looks like it's going to be okay. Although that leaves the e2 pawn as well a little bit weak. So that's quite messy as well. So he doesn't take it, just plays g3. That looks like it allows queen e6. But then maybe knight h4, threatening to take on c6 in some lines too. So yeah, there are a few little problems. If Edouard can maintain that pawn center, then he should be doing quite well. But my fear will be that it's not stable at the moment at all. G3 is a good restraining move. I don't know if e4 is much good here. Takes. Knight e5 is possible then. e4, knight h4 is also possible. So yeah, I don't trust e4 that much. So perhaps we should go back to the twin games. Let's start with the Studer game, and that one is developing slowly as well. So Hari Krishna has just got his pieces out. He's actually managed to play a double fianchetto by putting his bishop on c6 and b7. He needs one more move to move his queen and then castle queenside, and it looks satisfactory. But white's pawn center is starting to roll. So I'm not sure there's a threat here yet for white. So is queen d7 a decent move? There'd be two questions. One would be knight e5, and one would be e5 followed by e6. Neither of them look that scary, so I'm not too worried after e4. Certainly, Studer is ahead on the clock here. Studer hasn't bothered to castle queenside, but it could be a good idea fairly soon. So that queen e1 maneuver did look rather clever. This is a Dutch defense gone a bit wrong here for black. Or if you like, a bird's opening that's gone extremely well. bird's opening being 1f4 as a starting move. Well, that's exactly what happened. So yeah, this one's fine for the underdog, Noel Studer, who has yet to score a point yet. So we will then switch to the Adams game. I don't want to actually go from game to game too often, but we'll just see. So Adams and Wojciech, again, neither player has castled queenside yet, which is probably what's going to happen. Although if White wanted, he could now jump his king to G1. Maybe wants his king on the king side. It's fairly safe there. Maybe there'll be an F4 move when he's not looking. It could be annoying. But overall, Adams is solid. So is Wojciech. Okay, so king C1 was castle's queenside. And, well, to be honest, Adams is playing this in a very solid way. And it's hard to see either player getting much here. Maybe in the long run, the white e-pawn might be a little bit of a problem, but to be honest, it doesn't look serious at all. So this one is looking a bit more like a draw. So let's try the back to the Studer game, I guess, and see. Let's go. Excuse me, I'm trying to get there. And in the Studer game, yeah, so Studer is better. This is the one that's likely to be an upset. This is the one we're going to stay with. So don't believe the clock times. A minute ago, it said that Studer was way ahead on the clock. It's very hard to get these clock times right. But certainly, Black is getting ready to castle queenside. I wouldn't be surprised if both players castled queenside soon. But as I mentioned before, I think White is thinking about e5, e6, followed by knight g5, and stealing the h-pawn. It's possible that there could be a bishop takes c3 when we're not looking is a conceivable problem. Not if the knight went back to e8, but if it went back to g8, for example. So yeah, it's I can't see a knockout blow here for Studer, and he really shouldn't spend too much time because his position's pretty good. So if he just wants to go bishop g2 or castle queenside or make his position better, that would be a lot more productive than looking for a forced win around here, I'd say. I don't think Black's position is that unstable that there's liable to be a forced win. Of course, you can also consider playing e5 and d4 and just going for space, but I don't think there's too much happening after e6 that you can do. White is not really set up for your normal kingside attack in the French, and Black's king is over on the other side. So not worth a breakthrough like that. So, okay, I guess for okay, again, this is probably not quite exciting enough. So let's switch to one we've neglected a little bit, and that is David Anton's game. So he is playing Romain Edouard, and certainly it's suddenly livened up. White suddenly threw a pawn into the mix with knight d5. And so I presume after rook takes d5 by Edouard, he wants to take on e5 now. It's complicated, but after rook takes bishop c6 was the idea. Instead, he went knight g5. And I have to admit the h7 pawn is sort of the least relevant pawn I can think of. Sure, you might get to steal it with a tempo, but it's certainly not a real worry for Black. So Black now could consider e4, but yeah, he probably could consider e4 here as a method of getting through on the e file or the d file. The only problem with e4 is you're self-pinning. So when the queen moves, it's not. But the queen doesn't have an easy square. Yeah. So e4 is definitely possible here for Edouard. And I must admit, knight g5 looks so awkward that I just don't expect that it can be a good move. So e4 played by Edouard. So if you want to steal h7, you're welcome, but black can play rook f7 and then swing it to either d7 or e7. Both of them look pretty good squares. The only problem with black's position here is really that the bishop on h8 is pretty horrible. But the other black pieces are working rather well. I do want to get my queen out of d2 so that I can take on e4. Oh, he's taken on h7, so rook g8 looks silly. So I think I'll go rook f7, knight g5, rook e7, something along those lines. Rook g8 played. So is that knight going to rescue itself? It doesn't have to immediately, but certainly leaving pieces unprotected is normally not very productive. This is definitely the game of the round. So Anton is, well, probably doing, well, it's hard to know if he's doing okay. I mean, he'd love to move his queen to a good square, but if you go queen d1, we've got rook takes d3. So the knight rescued itself, okay. And here, maybe g6 makes some sense while white is still in a pin. Maybe queen e7 and then perhaps back up that e pawn. Right now, the white king is reasonably safe. It'll also be safe after castle's queenside. Yeah, Anton is certainly setting his opponent some annoying problems. He's picked up a pawn, but yeah, the question is whether black's initiative with those pawns is actually going to go anywhere. White still can't take on e4, of course, because there's a pin. So he moves rook d6, which again looks like a dodgy square, but he is threatening to take on d3 now, and that's something. If we now play d4, then I presume black will play something like e3. Although then you've got queen d3 and there's a lot of weak pawns. So we can also take on f5 here if we want, but pawn takes d3 and bishop g6 or something along those lines could be very annoying. So yeah, there's also back rank issues. So I think the safest would be d4, but leaving but it does leave the bishop on h1 badly placed. So the knight can easily come back from g5 to h3 to f4, but the bishop on h1. By the way, for those just tuning in, we're in the third round of the CHESS960 tournament at the Biel Chess Festival. This is only a tiebreaker. This doesn't count for anything except a tiebreaker when for whoever wins the main event. And but we do have 8 top grandmasters here playing. Certainly 4 of them are over 2,700, and the lowest rated is 15-year-old Vincent Kamer, who has had some remarkable results in his young career, most notably second in the Vienna Open when he was just 11, and then a couple of years ago in the Grenke Open, winning that ahead of, I think, nearly 50 grandmasters. It was an astonishing effort. So rook d6. Anton would love to take on f5 if it's possible. But somehow I'd be reluctant to give my opponent that much counterplay. I think the threat here is to take on d3 and then play bishop e2, which is just a bit annoying. So if you take on f5, we can take. Oh, but bishop e2 doesn't threaten anything then. It's really hard to know. For killing counterplay, perhaps d4 is the right move. And then e3, and then gradually get your bishop out to g2 and maybe f1 and your knight to f4 and so on. Or maybe just keep the knight there and play h4 and maintain it on g5. It's certainly safer than anything else. So no move for a long time from David Anton. If I didn't know better, it'd indicate a transmission problem, but hopefully not. Let's see how the other games are going. Let's go, say, to Michael Adams' game and just see how that one is progressing. Wow, we just had very, very, very long castling by Anton, getting the king to a worse square, I'd have to say. But that's a bit weird, but no, probably not a worse square. Okay, so Mickey Adams' game. And this one is against Radoslav Wojtaszek, so our co-top seed up against the veteran in the tournament. And Adams has got a pawn down for no apparent reason, but black still hasn't castled. So if I'd like to play something like Queen d7 here, but I just don't have time after Knight g5, because if I can have back rank threats with Knight takes e6 and this sort of thing, and of course e4 is hanging. So that's not simple at all. So Queen h6 is just simply annoying. Rook h8 looks just horrible. Then I'm absolutely sure that there's compensation for the material. If white could ever get a knight to d7 safely, then that would be a bit embarrassing for black because you can't castle out a check. But in fact, it would be a rather nice smothered mate. But yeah, so a5. So he's just ditching that pawn on h7. But however, that does allow knight g5, and that could still be a good move. Let's see, knight g5, bishop h1. Knight takes e6, we have to swap on f1 and take on e6, and then back rank check is not mate. And black is probably doing okay. So knight g5 does not appear to be decisive. So taking on h7 makes sense. The only question is whether there's some nice knight fork. So queen h7, bishop takes f3, bishop takes f3, or rook takes f3, and knight g5. No, not quite working either. So it is possible to take on h7. Knight g5 or taking on f3 first doesn't seem to work. It's close, but it doesn't seem to work. Remember, these guys are only on move 13 of the game. One of the things about Fischer Random, which these players are playing, that's where the pieces are set on different squares to normal at the start of the game, assigned by the organizers. Then one of the things about these is that you have to start thinking on move 2. It's the same rationale for playing the Trompowsky opening in real chess. You force them to try and think early, although, to be honest, even the Trompowsky has lots of theory attached. The leaked video during the 2018 World Championship match between Carlsen and Caruana. The video showed some preparation of Caruana's, and it shows the team analysing a very complicated line of the Trompowsky that they presumably thought Carlsen might play. But of course, after the video came out, the Carlsen seconds were able to concentrate on that position and decide whether they want to play it or not, and they certainly decided not to play the Trompowsky during the match. Probably they had no intention of doing that anyway. So Adams seems to have compensation, so we might move on to another game. And how about we go back to the Anton game, because that certainly seems to be where the action is. So the Anton game, remembering white has won a pawn, but black is counterattacking, and white castled on the king side. White's king was on b1. It jumped all the way over to g1. The rook on f1 didn't move. Meanwhile, black was castling on the queen side. He did it a bit earlier. And okay, here black is desperately trying to get pressure on e2. So for example, if you take on e2 now, you can get a pass pawn on d3. It doesn't seem so deadly. Is there any trick here to get extra pressure on e2, like an e3 move followed by rook e8? Looks a bit dodgy, but not impossible. The knight on g5 is both offside and fairly safe. And of course, the bishop on h8 isn't moving. Okay, so g6 played. Finally, that bishop is good. So king h8, making sure that when knight takes it on e2, it doesn't happen with check. g6 also protected the f5 pawn, so the black queen is free to roam here. And, well, I'm not sure, but it could be that white is already threatening to take on e4. The knight can move lots of different squares, but maybe knight f3 is playable then, though white would have a lot of compensation for the exchange. So, but perhaps white's queen wants to go somewhere. It's just not easy to find a spot to go to where you also protect the e2 pawn. So there's definite pressure here for Edouard against Anton. Very difficult to play when short of time, and certainly both players are fairly short of time. They're playing a 15-minute game with 5-second increment. Okay, queen e7 played, thinking about the e3 move. The safe move here would probably be h4, although maybe then bishop f6. So knight h3 played. And now is g5 a move, or can you just take on d4 and take on f5? Really hard to say. I'd love to go g5 just to keep that knight on h3 out of f4, because I think knight f4 is going to be very annoying. I could also keep it out of there with bishop e5, but I don't think I want to give up that bishop for a knight. I could also play e3, but then the queen moves to d1, and again after g5 we can take on d4 and take on f5 and pick up a second pawn. And of course when you play e3 you make the bishop on g2 into a bit of a monster for later. So somehow Anton is keeping everything together. But Edouard's position looks good. It's just a question of finding a way through. So I'd love to play knight f3 here, but unfortunately my queen's on a stupid square. Yeah, so if my queen was on c6 or something, I reckon I could play knight f3 because the bishop on h3 is trapped. But of course, it wouldn't have been trapped unless the queen knocked it back to h3. So I guess I'm dreaming. Here, still not easy to find a good move for black. I'm sure e3 is reasonable compensation for the pawn, but I just don't like watching white play queen d1 and maybe come out on a4 at some point. So e3 played. So he should reply almost immediately with queen d1 because it's the only move that protects the pawn on e2. And now what? He played g5. So immediately he wants to get a pawn. So after he doesn't take back. He plays queen b3. That's a double attack on g8 and b7. That looks absolutely deadly. Oh, that was an easy one to miss. So e3 was a blunder, forcing the queen to d1 because suddenly bishop takes d4 and queen b3 became a threat. And I don't know if Romain has anything to do here. I'm not sure. I'm going to take with the queen. It is only one pawn in a way, but it's a pretty good pawn. So maybe bishop f7, or I don't know, rook f8 maybe, queen b7, king runs away and hopes for the best, but no, white will play rook c1 and it'll be game over very, very soon. So Edouard, I suspect, is going down, and then we will, assuming he does resign this, or loses it on time, which is also completely possible. So still no move from him though. I'm looking at the scene in the playing hall, and he's still completely concentrated. I guess with his opponent short of time, he just wants to find a way to stay alive. But no, this double attack is over. I think I'm putting this down to a win for Anton. So he's bounced back very well after his first round loss. And let's go back to the Adams game, I think. and see how the old Englishman is doing against Wojciech. Whoa, something very weird's happened here. Oh no, his rook on f6 is not hanging because knight d7 check. Queen e3, rook d6. Now, somehow Adams is still down a pawn, and he's got his rook and knight in a little bit of a tangle. So queen f2, I don't think rook f8 is a threat. Yeah, so e3, this is already looking terrible. Absolutely terrible. Queen f3, we can keep pushing if we want. I guess you can go knight d3, but no, we take it then. So how do you stop that pawn with rook d1 mate? You don't. So Adams is about to resign, and Wojciech wins a third game in a row. Knight c4 played, allowing mate in one. Fair enough. Or maybe not played. Maybe he was saying he should have played that instead of queen e3. It's quite possible the players are sort of moving the pieces around at the moment. So let's go back up to Noel Studer and his battle against Pentala Hari Krishna. And Hari Krishna has picked up a single pawn. It looks a pretty good pawn, to be honest. His pawn structure, well, apart from the e-pawn, is a little bit better. The knight can go to c6 and a5, and then think about c4 with rook e4 as well. Bishop's trying to come back and rescue things. So rook to rook e2, I would have gone to e4, but it's still going to work out pretty well. And he's just pushing his e-pawn, which is eminently reasonable. I would also have been thinking about bringing my king up, but okay, the king can now go to e6 whenever it wants to. There's also a knight d4 move in some positions. So rook d3, knight d4 would probably be answered by bishop takes e5, and then it gets unnecessarily messy. So he may well just go e4 here and let the bishop come back. h5 played by Hari Krishna. He is well on top here. Rook c3 played. It helps the king come out, probably to b7, but and king c1. So the king's trying to stop that pawn, but you know, rook e4. Hari Krishna is absolutely ruthless here. Rook across is forced. Then we can sit on c4 if we want. He wants knight a5, knight c4. The white king, of course, is then in a mating net. So suddenly Studer decides, okay, I need the g-pawn, I need some counterplay. Well, he decided not to, he's, okay, knight e3 check, he wants knight f5. The bishop will move, f6 presumably, no, h8, stay out of trouble. And now if we take the a-pawn, at least you get the e5 pawn. So rook check first, king will go somewhere, and then can we go e4 then? Quite possibly, but the bishop will come back to f2. So rook d3. So if takes, presumably he takes with the king and allows bishop. So he just went back again. Okay. Hari Krishna's not quite knowing what the winning path is, but he's certainly not giving anything away. The knight on f5 is a pretty good piece. The only problem is that the rook is sort of stuck on e4. At any moment, we can take on a4. So knight d6 threatens to take on a4 because then there will be bishop b5, knight c4 check. And the king's coming around to e6 now. So bit by bit, things are getting a little bit better for Hari Krishna. So rook here, that's not really a mating attack, but he's thinking about e4, e3, I guess. So I'm a little bit surprised he doesn't put his king on e6 sometime soon, but there is bishop d8, which is a pest. So he goes king c6, and now he's thinking also about knight b7, knight c5. He's doing it a different way and a much better way. Now g3 is under attack, and there's also knight c5 check, and that puts that king in a rather bad spot. So bishop d8, there's no way to actually, well, knight g3, you might be able to, yeah, here, rook rook e4 would be good. Rook e3 looks pretty good too. I would say Studer is going down. King here. Check. That's an a4 pawn with check. Oh. c4. Okay. And mate. Very, very well played ending by Hari Krishna. He sort of distracted his opponent with the e-pawn and then kept improving his knight bit by bit. So impressive work by Hari Krishna. He goes to 2.5 points. I guess Anton is the big game now. So we will have a look at David Anton, remembering he was doing extremely well. And I think he's just won, to be honest. Let's have a look. Where has it gone? Yeah, Anton is absolutely game over. So Edouard has resigned. Do we have any games left? Remembering Adams has already lost. Donchenko and Kamer is weird. Yeah, Kamer is going for his 3rd win in a row, but Donchenko's position looks pretty good. So let's keep following that one. So lots of pawns. King e7, presumably the rook will go back to f4. I guess knight e6 will be played and knight d4 again, but then rook d5, and bit by bit he may be making progress. He takes on h5. Okay, now at least Kamer's got rid of one of the big pawns here. If he takes with the king, then rook d5. So he's taking with the rook and allowing b7. Extremely risky, but he may have the idea after b7 to answer with rook takes f2, but I suspect that will be probably not good enough. So king c4 first to avoid any tricks on the b file. I guess the knight will want to rush back. It's rushing back to e6. It's all very weird. b7 looks great. If rook back, we can just push the pawns. He's doing it with the king. White's king can try to come across. Black's king can try to come across, but it's going to be a bit late. And it looks like Kamer is finally going down to the substitute, Alexander Donchenko. Now the a-pawn will proceed. There's a rook d5 check first if you'd like. And time to push some pawns. And remember, there's an h-pawn there as well. So there's not much to be done here. I think Kamer will give it away. And that is, no, he's not giving it away yet. a6, we can always play rook b5 now, finally. Yep. Pawn queens, rook b5, and no checks. So Kamer has lost, and that is it for round 3. We have Radoslav Vojdasek as our sole leader now on 3 out of 3. He's looked pretty good, especially for a guy who, according to the output, lost his first game, but he didn't. He beat Edouard, and now he's knocked over Mickey Adams, and he is doing well. Just on his heels is Pentala Hari Krishna. These two have not played yet, of course, and so we're hoping for a big matchup when they play. And in fact, that will be later in the tournament in round 5. Okay, so I will take a break now and see you all in just a few minutes. Okay, so this is the Biel Chess Festival signing off for a few minutes. So enjoy the video.
some more again. Include some more again. conclusion more again. Conclusion more again.
Welcome back to round 4 of the Biel Chess Festival. The video you just saw is not that different to what Biel looks like today, except that the the general area, the cafes are open, restaurants are open. It's almost like a normal summer in Biel. June 6th, Switzerland was open with 300 people. Radoslav Wojtaszek from Poland, half a point behind him is Pentala Hari Krishna, and then half a point further back is Alexander Donchenko, which is a little bit of a surprise. And we also have Mickey Adams on half out of 3, which is a bit of a disappointment given he was the most experienced of the CHESS960 players, and also Noel Studer, the local player, is unfortunately sitting on 0 points at the moment. So we've got his game. It's beginning to look a little bit like other games, but this particular game started with the G pawn as the only unprotected pawn, and it's also with both rooks in the corner having a rather more normal look than a lot of these games. Now, if you look back at what's been played before, the E4 is by far the most popular move. This position's been played nearly over 150 times in 2020 on online CHESS960. Remember, we're playing CHESS960 here. That's why all the pieces look on crazy squares. And the E4 or knight F3 were by far the most common choices. And knight F3 scored pretty well, better than any other alternative. So the C3 ideas didn't tend to do so well, but yeah, we'll see how that goes further along the line. So so the game we're watching is Studer against Anton, and Studer has decided, well, I'm just going to take the center and back it up with a pair of knights. Now, it's not completely clear where Black's bishops are going. It's quite possible after d5 that the one bishop might want to sit on c7, but then the queen can't get out. So maybe queen d6 and bishop b6 is playable. But if you play d5, then something like bishop c3 could be annoying. So it's a big question for Studer whether he's happy just to go d6 or not. And of course, White has a few pieces not so well placed. And, yeah, his queen on b1 looks a bit funny. I wonder if it'll become a thin shadowed queen with queen b2, again hitting e5. So with bishop e2, this is indicating White probably wants to go knight g3 and castle kingside. And that's not such a silly idea, though Black does seem to have some sort of ready-made attack on that flank. Mind you, Black doesn't have a lot of pieces pointed at the king. The queen on b8 doesn't look fantastic for mating anyone. So Anton is happy just to develop his pieces and see what happens after that. And that's eminently reasonable. So from here, we might go to Mr. Wojtaszek's game, because he is the tournament leader, and his struggle in this round is against Alexander Donchenko, who is well, he's a surprise packet of the tournament on 2 out of 3, but he's probably surprised just to be here, to be honest. So let's see if we can find the Donchenko game. Certainly the position we have on the board is the wrong round, I think. Is that right? Or else I'm seeing something different. No, it's the right round. It's just the wrong game. So I'd like to see the Wojtaszek Donchenko game. And Donchenko, last-minute substitute. There's a tradition about them doing quite well in tournaments. But well, here he's up against Radoslav Wojtaszek, who's looked really good. He hasn't just won the games, but it looks like he's won them quite convincingly. So we'll see how that one goes, if we can get it up on the screen soon. But White, okay, White has a big pawn center. You guys can't see it yet. Unfortunately, we're having trouble switching games on the broadcast, so I might just look at the one that's on the screen. Oh no, but the one that's on the screen is not one of. No, there's something very weird going on here. So the one that's on the screen is simply not being played right now. So I guess while I wait for the technical problems to correct, I should tell you something about the tournament. So it's the 53rd Biel Chess Festival, and it is the first big international tournament to be played, a big international classical tournament at least, to be played since the coronavirus outbreak caused the candidates tournament to be abandoned at the end of March. And that tournament, we still don't know if and when it can be held. It looks like it may have to move to a relatively safe COVID place, wherever that is. We're not sure. So there are 8 players invited. The equal top seeds are Pentala Hari Krishna and Radoslav Wojtaszek, both in the world's top 30, both aged in their 30s. And then we have David Anton. He is the Spanish player, only 25 years old, with a 2700 plus rating, obviously very promising. Born in Murcia, way south of Madrid, but when he was very young, his family moved to Madrid and his chess has developed there. And then the 4th seed is Michael Adams, very well known many 15 Olympiads, I think, 7 British championships. He even won. He's played Biel back in 2015, but he even played as far back as 1991. And of course, he played in interzonal. The Biel Chess Festival 3 times has involved an interzonal. Now, for the young ones among you, it's the interzonal is what happened when people were trying to qualify for the candidates matches back then. It wasn't a candidates tournament most of the time, and around the world, people qualified from their local area, their zone, qualified for an interzonal, and the top few in the interzonal would go through to the candidates. Although the interzonals got bigger and bigger, eventually they became Swiss system tournaments, and well, they even experimented with a knockout interzonal, which Adams lost in the final to Vishwanathan Anand, and the winner went straight to challenge Anatoly Karpov for the FIDE world title of the time. And as we know, Anand lost that one in tiebreakers back in the 90s, before he was world champion many times over later. So, okay, so let's have a look at Wojciech against Donchenko. White did play c5 on move 9 with the idea if you take on c5, we take on e5, and bishop c7 played. And most of these positions look pretty good for White. I would expect White will now take on e5 and then leave the bishop looking bad on c7, probably put a bishop on b3 and then castle kingside. And that looks like a very decent sort of king's, well, it's not a King's Indian, but it's a structure you can sometimes get from the King's Indian with a pawns on e4, open d file, e4, e5, open d file, and a white pawn on c5. But here the white pawn on c5 doesn't seem very vulnerable. In some other lines it might be. So yeah, taking on e5, the only problem with it is that it does give a d file away to black, but I'm not too worried. Of course, we could also play bishop b3 straight away, and that looks like a decent move as well. So Wojciech is looking for something really good here. That's why he's using up a lot of time. And yeah, certainly it's difficult. It's very, very difficult for the black side here. White's pieces are well placed. The bishop is going to be really good on b3. E4 pawn's protected. The only piece I don't especially like is the queen on d2, but well, it's on a decent square. So yeah, so here we're happy with that game. So let's move on to perhaps Edouard's game. So let's see. So the Edouard game is against Michael Adams, and already I rather like Adams's position. It is opposite bishops, but I'm not sure how that bishop on e2 is really going to become active. It feels as if we can control c5 and play a5, that could be good. Now maybe White's looking at f4 and e5 and bishop f3. That also makes sense. So another question is whether Black wants to go e5. I'm always reluctant to put my pawn on e5 in case White gets c5 and bishop c4 in. So yeah, it's possibly okay for Edouard, but it's a remarkable normal looking position except for the queen on b8, and that can come out almost immediately if you want to. The other possibility, which may be to wait for f4 and then play e5, because if you play f5, then after h6, you're liable to have your pawns rather stuck there. And in fact, even h6 is possible. My problem with h6 is if White manages to rearrange the queen and bishop, there might be a queen h7, but Adams is confident that's not going to happen. So now if f4, I'm absolutely sure he's going to want to go e5. and that certainly looks decent. We can follow it up with bishop d6 if we need to, and put lots of pressure on f4. So White would like to go c5, but I guess queen e5 is a good answer then, and that pawn could get into a bit of trouble. And if b4, we can hit it with a5. So even after c5, queen c7 is probably a more sober move, but also pretty good. So a little bit better for Michael Adams, and you would expect this to be a relatively long game. So we'll go to Vincent Kamer's game. Kamer lost his first game in the previous round. He was on 2 out of 2, but now not quite so good. And he's up against the second placeholder, Pentala Hari Krishna. And this has suddenly got exciting because Kamer is sacrificing a pawn, but if you take, you could be walking into some sort of pin. There could be a knight d5 move. So he does take knight d5. If you take on e2, we take back and suddenly the knight's hanging. But my problem with knight d5 is the f3 move. And now maybe we can just answer with knight f4 then, but it feels very unstable. So I'm not quite sure about that. Still, I'm pretty sure he intended it. I doubt he intended knight g2, which would allow f3 under probably even better circumstances. So is there anything else? Is there a bishop g4 check in some position? So could we just take on f4 with the knight as a pawn sacrifice? Maybe, but the attack is happening without the white's queen's participation at the moment. But certainly that queen could turn up on f5 at any moment after e5. So maybe that's something to be nervous about if you're black. Anyway, Kamer played f4 really quickly, and now he's thinking, which is at least a little odd. I like putting the knight on d5. f3 would almost certainly be the move played. And then probably knight e2 to f4. Then it's a real mess. But what else is better? So it's very tough. So Kamer, the lowest rated, the youngest player in the tournament, up against the highest rated player, and he's causing some worries here. I really suspect that when playing bishop g5, Hari Krishna sort of underestimated, or at least when playing bishop b5, underestimated this f4 move. The problem is Kamer played the tactics so fast that it's really, really, it'd be really surprising if there wasn't something a little wrong. Now, f3 looks right, but knight e2 to f4, and I'm not sure you're actually holding that pawn on f3. And of course, that means the knight on h5 is offside rather badly. Remember, if you play c6, we've at least got knight b6 check, so you can't just get rid of the knight like that. Something like bishop c6 could be interesting in order to put pressure on the e4 pawn, because it may be bishop c6 and rook e8, and that could prove quite embarrassing. So f3 played. Okay, so here we'll take on g5, or play knight f4, actually. If he takes on g5, take on e2. Actually, even that doesn't look too bad, but it's awkward. So I think I'd rather play knight f4. And that's protected 3 times, so black can't win anything by taking it. And yeah, it does seem like there are some problems here for Hari Krishna, and we will see. And wonder what he can do here. Not too much. Not too much at all. So Kamer is better, I think, after knight f4. Is there some trick? I mean, the point is, after knight f4, if you take with a knight, we probably take back with the pawn to keep up the pressure, and then bishop takes f3. If you take with the bishop, we may well take with the pawn anyway, but and there's a pin on the pawn on f3, but you can play bishop e2 then, so that's at least messy. Anyway, with Hare Krishna's king locked out of the game, but it's not the queen's locked out of the game, but in fact, not really, because black can actually castle kingside round here, and that may be what he wants to do. So king to g8, rook jumps over to f8, and at least your king's safe. And then it's not clear how good white's attack is and whether that knight on h5 is as bad as it looks. So definitely promising there. Absolutely. So I guess we should go back to the Anton game, because that one up against the local hero. I'm sure the Swiss fans are keen to see how Studer is going, whether he's going to get his first point of the event. And certainly it looks like he's got a very decent position. There's one fantastic knight on f5, but Studer is working around it. He can get rid of it when he needs to. There's no big attack on the king side because of the knight on f5, which might mean the knight needs to jump into e7 sometime, but it's not really getting out that easily. And the pawn on f4 is not a real problem for white, but it does hold back the piece that gets a bit. So black's just thinking about playing queen d8, cover all the threats, cover d5. If white ever swaps, then you can put a rook on c8, which is going to be annoying. So bit by bit, black's getting back to a very normal position. Anton, no, okay, king b1 is just a safety first move on the assumption that there's no big breakthrough here, but a simple move like queen d8 looks a5 play, that not so simple. He was worried about bishop b4 perhaps, maybe, but a5 does create other commitments. Bishop b4 I would have thought could be answered by c5, but there are some complications after c takes d5, so this just keeps the bishop out of b4, and it's very healthy. So Anton, again, is struggling to find a sensible move here. Bishop f3 looks normal, but then queen d8, I suspect, is absolutely fine. So rook c1 played. I guess the bishop on c7 is a bit of a problem, but not really. Queen d8 anyway. So I wonder. Okay, we don't want to play b5 because we don't want the white queen turning up on c6. That wouldn't be a lot of fun. Yeah, black seems to have good control here. The clock times look bad, but I wouldn't worry too much. And yeah, all in all, the games are really well. It's messy, but black is better. Okay, I think I'd like to see what's happening to Adams, because that was one I thought was either going to peter out to a draw, or Adams was going to take control. Oh, this is weird. Okay, it could be a bit of both. So right now, black is a pawn down. He's bringing his king over to take on e5. Now there's a question about whether white can bring his king to b5 quickly and play a3 and b4. But no, he's indirectly defending his, or is he? No, his king e6 is playable anyway. Bishop h3 looks absolutely pointless. g5, king takes pawn. What's the problem? It's just bluff, I guess. Or maybe it's an attempt to swap as many pawns off as possible. So after g5 check and king d3, yeah, you do think it's going to be agreed to draw. So this is one that is just petering out to a draw. So we won't go back to that too often. So let's see how Kamer is doing against the top seed, because yep, king e6 played by Adams, and it should be all bad. So something weird. Okay, so f3 knight f4 was played, and then just knight f6. So right now, well, Hari Krishna's managed to liquidate a bit. The king on d7 is not great, but I would expect it to be able to run away pretty quickly. White's queen needs to get to g4 fast. And I guess after bishop d2, king d2, the queen goes to d1 and g4 as fast as it can. So right now you can't go c6 again because of knight b6, a theme we saw before, and he has swapped. So how is he going to keep? White's queen can also go to f1 here, and that could be really nasty. So is black faster? I mean, queen d8. Are we coming to g5 first, or can white just go h4? Hard to say. Queen d8, h4, then we can play c6 if we want. And that will force the knight back probably to e3, and then I can imagine black's doing okay. The king can run to c7 whenever it needs to. So Hari Krishna's king is not as bad as it looks, and his clock is not as bad as it looks either. So queen d8 looks correct, and queen f1, queen f1, queen check, run away with the king. F7 is at least a little bit weak. So there's something to be said for that. There's also queen e8 in order to go queen e6 if necessary, or queen takes e4 if necessary. So queen e8 looks not bad. I wonder if white really can get pressure on the f pawn. Yeah, rook f1, get black to play f6, which doesn't feel that great. The other possibility here for black is knight e7, just to eliminate one of the attacking pieces. But queen d8 played, so I would expect queen f1 here. That looks sensible. And then if c6, I'll throw a queen g4 check in, queen f5 check in first before I move my knight back. And it's feeling like Kama has got something to play for here, definitely. So let's see if we've got any other. Well, actually, this is a time scramble, so we might stay with this to see if Kama can pull off the big upset. Remembering they're playing with 15 minutes plus 5 seconds per move, so it looks like they've both got about 3 minutes left, even though the clocks don't show that. So the we've had some results actually. I should just let you know that where am I? Here. Wojciech was held to his first draw by Donchenko, a perpetual check, and Adams and Edouard did make a draw. So we've only got 2 games going, Anton against Studer, and the one we're staying with, which is the Hari Krishna game. So rook f1 played. Queen g5 check is definitely possible. I don't know exactly where the king will go, whether it be d3 or c2. I'm beginning to think d3 to give the white queen the back rank and keep the e4 pawn protected. A bit weird, but I think it's okay. And yeah, he has to do something. So he did play check. So yeah, it's certainly king d3 looks the safest square, Steinitz king, and white's queen can come out later. But black is at least active. A pity about the knight on g6, but if it can ever come back to e7, that should be okay. There's a few little things about both kings. White's got a little bit more space, which means that white can, if white swaps queens, then the endgames are probably going to be quite good, especially with the king sitting on d3. So let's okay, knight e3 immediately. That is a surprise. Okay, you do have to worry about f7 though. Is he trying to trap that queen? I doubt it, but if f6, rook f5 is certainly annoying. Queen to h6, still okay though, but then we can throw, I don't know, queen g1, another rook to f1. Yeah, so maybe rook f5 is a pest. So knight e3 is quite a clever move. So he's not worried about rook f5. I'm not so sure. Rook f5, queen h6, maybe queen h1 is the move in order to go doubling rooks at some point. But knight e7, I guess, knocks us away. So that e4 pawn could be a little bit of a hassle at some point. White does have to be aware that not everything will necessarily go his way. So queen d3 and rook ae1 and move your king out of the way makes a bit of sense as well. Black seems to be just about okay there, though. Yeah, I don't mind. Queen d1 played, okay. So that's threatening rook f5 followed by rook h5. It does, however, allow moves like queen b5. So knight e7, and now if we want, we can play queen g4 check. As I said, little advantage for white, perhaps, maybe not much, but could be worth doing. I really don't like the fact I have to take that with the knight on g4 because it gives black things like h5, h4, and various pieces of counterplay. So it's it's close to balance now, I'd say. A4 played. Is he really going to play rook a3? I doubt it. He was probably more worried about queen b5. So rook e8 and game continues. I'm going to go back to the Studer game because that is really very complicated. Studer did get to play b5 and now, well, you wonder if he's starting to take control here. Is it worth going e4, giving away the d4 square and then f3 or something like that? He is doing it. So knight d4, we might take and go f3. Your bishop will probably get out of there, but your rook is stuck for a long time. So black can switch to ideas based on rook b8 and that sort of thing. So do you have a real choice apart from going to d4? You could take on d5 first, but it's hard to believe that makes any difference. But he did. So he should just take back automatically. I don't reckon taking on f3 is going to lead anywhere. Yes, he has taken back automatically. And now knight will go to d4. And now at least you've got bishop b5 after f3. So that's a slight improvement. But one important thing is after we play knight takes knight, knight takes knight, you can't take on f4 because there'll be these e3 tricks all the time. So take, and now black needs a good move, whether it be bishop a5 or a queen to a better square or bishop e5. Bishop a5 played just to gain a tempo. Of course, you're allowing bishop b5, which in some ways is a pity. I'm not sure where the queen's going to go either. If you go queen d6, we might even get away with taking on a4, though in this sort of game it looks very risky. So I'd say queen d6. Who cares about a4? If you take on a4, we're going to double the rooks and then charge down the a file. That looks pretty good. So the rook should move to d1 and see what happens next. Black maybe should throw a3 in at some point just to get that pawn off prees, as it were, and then play rook c7 and double rooks on the c file. Rook c7 played, so he really wants him to take on a4. This time it looks possible because after you double, the queen moves out of the way. And bishop b6 doesn't seem like it's anything special. So Anton is calling Studer's bluff. And right now, okay, Studer has got away with a pawn, and he's going to play a4 at some point to protect his bishop on b5. Bishop takes is possible, but I think I just take with a pawn here. I know my bishop on c1's bad, but I just don't want that bishop ever getting out of h7. And here there's some prospect of that happening. So white should probably now swap pieces if he can. He went a4 first, but definitely rook c1 when you get a chance. And the more pieces that come off, the more those protected, or not protected, but extra pass pawns on the queen side are going to be. Knight d7, unfortunately we can't jump our knight into c6 just yet, but that knight's headed for e5, but from where? Maybe it's going to c5. Knight f5 played. Well, takes. Yeah, there could be a problem. Oh, takes. Wow. If this works, and it does work though, doesn't it? Take, and rook d7, I suppose. Now, are there problems here with bishop c2 check and then threats on a4? I can't see the tactics immediately. King a2. Bishop b4. That seems to allow b3. I guess you could go rook c3 then. Maybe. So rook c1 played, and that is rather clever. That is protected. So king up. Looks like it's asking for trouble, but takes, and oh, king b3. He is forked, I think. Yep. So he can certainly get that b2 pawn, but I don't think it's going to be a mating attack. King a5, we can hide on b6. Oh, rook a4. And there's no... Oh, rook a7 played. Aha. Okay, now king b6 is going to happen at some point, and eventually we'll be able to push things. Remember, of course, there's a rook takes g7 check and bishop d4, so he covered d4. So I think king b6 makes sense. The rook hasn't got a lot of checking distance, and that king looks very safe. So now we do have bishop d4. So things are getting a bit tricky here for black. Very tricky. I'd say Studer is going down. So we'll just check. We've had a draw on the bottom board between Kama and Hari Krishna, so there is only the one game going, and that is the one we're looking at. So Hari Krishna goes to 3 out of 4, Kama goes to 2.5. So, well, White doesn't seem to have made much progress, but I guess the king on b7 is reasonably safe now that the rook is on e7. And I think we now have a result. Yes, Anton has won, and so he moves back to 50%. Anton was not having a good tournament, but he is back on 50%. So that is the end of round 4. Wojciech has kept his lead with 3.5. In fact, very little has changed. The only thing is Studer stays on 0 and Anton moves to 50%. Everything else is the same. We have Kama and Donchenko sitting half a point behind Hari Krishna, who is half a point behind our leader, Radoslav Wojciech. So right now, Wojciech is leading what is the tiebreaker for this Biel Grandmaster tournament, but it's a tournament in its own right, the 960. There are actually prizes for this event, as well as it being deciding any tie that occurs at the end of the tournament. So I think we'd better let the players have a break, and I'll have a break too. And I'll see you for round 5 with the big game, Hari Krishna against Wojciech in the next round.